morning. It's a great day here in Missouri. You know, yesterday I had a phone call and the person was asking who they should put first, their parent in this case or Yahweh. And this is a real common question we get here at the ministry. You know, and it's something as believers we need to really be resolute with. You know, who is our priority? What is our priority? And we believe here that our priority is Yahweh. He has to be number one. And when we don't, when we put others first, we're really saying, Yahweh, you're secondary in our life. So this person was asking me yesterday, how do we prove this? You know, what do we do to show that Yahweh is number one or should be number one? So, you know, we were talking, great discussion, and I shared with her a few passages. I want to share those with you today because I think it's absolutely vital as believers that we understand who comes first in our life today. It's all about priorities. So I want to share with you a few scriptures today. I'm going to sit down and have a little coffee here. So we see many examples of why Yahweh must come first. Probably the first one, the best one I think, is Matthew 10. Matthew 10 verse 34. And this is such an important passage. Matthew 10 verse 34. Here's what Yahshua says here. He says, "Think not that I come to send peace on the earth. I come not to send peace, but a sword." You know, it's funny because everybody out there, they believe that Yahshua came to bring love and grace and only peace. And that's not the truth. That's not what we find in Scripture. What we find in the Bible is truth does divide. Now listen to what he says here. He says, "For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." And he says in verse 36, "And a man's foes shall be they of his own household." So listen, if Yahweh's word doesn't divide, if it doesn't cause division, as then Yahshua's words here really have no point. Yahshua is saying here that when he came, his message was going to bring division amongst family members. And I think we see that today. Matter of fact, and really this is the crux of the issue here. Verse 37, he says that he that loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So what do we find here? We find that we as believers must put our Father in heaven first. This includes our parents, this includes our children. We're not to compromise his word. So many people today, they compromise his word because of family. They say, "Oh, I just can't do it because my wife won't allow it, or my parents won't allow it, or this or that." And listen, as believers, we can't go with this. We have to put Yahweh first. And we see other examples. I'm going to share just two more with you. The other example is in Acts 5, verse 30 or 28. And this is the apostles here are being persecuted because of their preaching of Yahshua the Messiah. And basically the Jews are saying, don't do this. And here's the response. And to give you some context, verse 28 says, saying, Did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in this name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Yeah, isn't that ironic? This man's blood upon us. That's precisely really what the apostles were trying to do. We're trying to bring Yahshua's blood upon those who would accept it. But verse 29 says, "And Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey Yahweh rather than men." And this is such a crucial passage because here Peter and the other apostles confirms where their allegiance must lie, and it must lie with our Father Yahweh. We cannot, again, change our faith. We cannot compromise our faith. We cannot lessen our faith because of family, because of friends, because of employers, because of professors, or whoever it is. And believe me, I've been around long enough to hear maybe every excuse out there of why we can't do something as a believer, and that's just not true. As a believer, it's all about priorities. What are we going to do? Who are we going to follow? Are we going to follow family? Are we going to follow friends? Are we going to follow coworkers? According to Acts 5 verse 29, we must follow Yahweh above or over man. And that's the message, very applicable. Now some people say, well, give me some other examples. So, we know in Scripture that we're to obey civil authorities. And I'm just going to turn and show you one example here in 1 Peter 2. 1 Peter 2 and verses 13. I'm going to read just a few verses here. It says, "Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for Yahweh's sake, whether it be for the king as supreme, or as unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of him that do well, for so is a will of Elohim." So listen, Yahweh's saying here that this is his will, this is his desire that we obey civil authorities. It says that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as a servant of Elohim. It says, "Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear Elohim, honor the king." So we see and listen, I mean, there's other examples showing that we're to obey civil governments, that we're to obey those over us in a civil manner. But now, saying that, and I'm not going to look at the scriptures, but you know the story. We have two stories in the book of Daniel. One story is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three friends of Daniel. And we find there in Daniel the king setting up an image and saying basically, everyone has to fall down when they hear the music. Well, we know the story. The three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused. And as a result, we know that they were thrown into a furnace. Now, that did not shake their faith. That did not change them. They withstood the king, and they were blessed for it. So there's instances where we as believers must choose between civil authorities and Yahweh. And again, the key is, does it go against Yahweh's word? If it goes against Yahweh's word, we must obey Yahweh rather than man, as we find in the book of Acts. Now, the other example I want to briefly talk about is the one in Daniel. Again, it's Daniel himself, and the king set a decree and saying basically, no one can pray to their mighty one, and Daniel refused because, again, it's his obligation to pray, and as a result, he was thrown into a den of lions. Now, we again know that in that case, Daniel was blessed. But again, that's another example where the civil authorities said to do something, and we find Daniel, in this case, doing something very different. So as believers, we must follow in these examples. So again, the question is, should we obey our parents, or should we obey someone here on earth versus our Father in heaven? The answer is we must always, always, always obey the one we worship. I'd like to thank you for joining me today and pray that your day is a blessed one, and we'll talk to you soon. May Yahweh bless.